Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 135 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I'm Gary, and I'm here with my friend Byron. How are you today, Byron?
Gary, I'm doing great. I'm excited for the show today. We've got Michael Ginn. He's got the new book coming out. I guess the book is out called The Science of Submission. And had a great day. Started off rolling with Gary. So a good day so far, Gary.
Yeah, there's nothing better than starting your day out with a little bit of rolling. So I got a couple hours of rolling in. Took a nap in the afternoon and hit the Y a little bit later. So it's been a good day. And now we get to record and talk to Michael Ginn and The Science of Submission. So incredible day.
Yep. It's things are going good for us today, Gary.
That is true. We are lucky people.
Yes, we are. And we're lucky to have this podcast and really to have you put us in your ear every week. And we do a show every week. And one way that we're able to help support that is with the audiobook. It's called Your First Year of BJJ. And it's basically this guy right here, me, talking to you. It's about 2.5 hours long. I'm going to walk you through all the common hurdles and things you're going to experience your first year and help smooth that out for you a little bit and make it easier. Because we really think that the first year is the toughest. And if we can get you through that, you'll have found an activity that you love to do. Because it is a lot of fun if you can get through that first year. Sometimes even that first week or that first month can be tough. And you'll have this for a long time, and it'll be a great benefit to your life. But the book is $11.99. Find it on our website, bjjbrick.com, or in the show notes, and that money goes to help support the show.
Yep, and I know Byron didn't mention it, but it's getting great reviews. And the most important thing is we want to help people through the first year. We want people to keep doing this sport and just grow the sport even more. So definitely check it out. And as Byron said, we have a show every single week. We have not missed a week. It's been 135 straight. The one thing you can say about us is we're consistent. So, but one way not to miss another episode is get on our email list. We have a link on our show notes there. We do not sell your name out to anybody. We don't spam your inbox. We're just here to get our show out to you. So if you sign up, give us your email, we will send you a link to our show every single week, and that way you'll never miss an episode. And you know, if you've listened to us a lot of times, you know the great guests we have. But like even this week, I mean, you definitely don't want to miss our interview with Michael Ginn.
Yep. Gary, we are consistent. I keep telling my wife that it's a good thing, but, like I'll cook some meal and it will kind of be a flop, and, well, at least I'm consistent, Yeah.
But, well, I was thinking about this when we were driving back from Jiu-Jitsu this morning, and I can't remember how many years we've been training, but I know we're in double digits. And the crazy thing is we started within like 2 weeks of each other.
Yeah.
And we're still doing it. It's like neither of us have ever taken time off besides for an injury. Like neither of us has ever quit or, took a year off and I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that have went on with our lives, and we have never taken time off. That's pretty neat. Yeah,
we're both still, I think that's probably a common thing for people. I mean, it's amazing that you and I started. We started in, the best I could figure out, April or May of 2002 is when I started. I think you were there a month or two before me. But
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking it was about 14 years. So we're right there then.
Yeah.
I think I started in March of that year.
Yeah, but I think most people who train kind of have those people they start with, or maybe they're around that same time, and they kind of go along together, in the long term. Maybe you move and you keep up with them online, or maybe you just stay in the same gym, or maybe your paths kind of go out and come back occasionally. But you don't forget the people who are there when you first start. And,
and the crazy thing is, like, we really don't even train at the same gym. That's the even crazy part, that we've, we train once a week together, but we kind of a little bit went our own ways. We've always still stayed in touch and kept rolling, but it's just cool that we've been around that long. And like you said, we are consistent people. I may be consistently bad on the mat, but at least I'm consistent.
Yep. And I know it is crazy that we made a podcast for 135 weeks in a row. That is crazy. Considering, Gary, we're back. I just got back from being gone for 3 weeks on a trip, and Gary and I did was recorded episodes, back to back together, and we built up a log of interviews, and we didn't want you guys to miss a show, and we didn't want to just kind of bail on you for a couple weeks. So we worked a little extra hard, and now we're back, and we're producing this show. We're recording this now on the 14th, and it's going to come out, I think, on the 16th there. So we're back up to more of a real time. But
we tried another thing to do. Sometimes Byron, like you said, he likes to experiment a little bit, and he tried to make 2 robots to record a show for us when we are gone, or when Byron was gone on vacation, but it didn't work. So we actually had to jump this one in here real quick.
The problem with the robots, my robot was funnier than I am. That kind of made me mad. And Gary's robot caught fire. So neither one of them worked out that great.
Yeah, he blew up and burned my house down. But no biggie. I have insurance.
That's what insurance is for. Gary, we've got a lot to talk about today. I believe you found a really fun, not like maybe quote, but maybe just something somebody wrote on Facebook. What do you have there, Gary?
Yeah, it's I was one of our former guests, Yuri Simoes. He had a great thing on his Facebook, and I don't necessarily know if it's his quote, but he posted it, so we're crediting this to Yuri here. But here it goes. One day I was shopping. I went into a store that had cool swords. I told the guy, "Do you have any katanas?" as I've always wanted one. He said, "Of course," sold me one, and told me to be very careful. It can cut a car. As soon as I got home, I took the sword out and I hit a tree. The sword broke. I got super upset, went back to the store and said, "Man, you sold me a faulty sword. It couldn't even cut a plant." The guy said, "The sword is good. It is your technique that was faulty." And when I read that, I just thought that's like the best thing I've read in a long time. And, the sword was good. He just had faulty technique. And you think about in jiu-jitsu, we always talk about technique. And you've got to have solid technique. You got to really work the technique to make the move work.
Yeah, Gary. We always will have a quote, and then we sometimes will dive deeper into the quote and try to take some meaning out of it, or maybe look at it from a different angle. Playing the devil's advocate here, Gary. What do you think about the guy never said it would cut a tree? He said it would cut a car.
Well, I actually think a car is probably harder than a tree. I mean, cutting steel, unless it was a cardboard card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Devil's advocate, he didn't say what kind of car it was. He could have cut the tire.
Yeah, you cut the tire or the upholstery when you're driving home with it. Maybe he's worried about you driving home. Or maybe this, Gary, another angle coming at you. You bought a faulty sword, and the guy's blaming you. You used bad technique. The sword is good, my friend. I'll sell you another one for a little bit more money. But your technique is bad. So that just kind of I guess I'm destroying part of the quote there. But
yeah, hey, thanks a lot, Byron. I spent a lot of time getting that technique. But the crazy thing is, like Byron said, I'm like the guy, I can never figure out what these quotes mean half the time. Byron has to figure it out. My mind doesn't work that way. But when I saw this one, I was like, hey, this is the coolest quote I've read. I was like, I got to get Byron on this, and now he trashes my quote.
No, I do like it. It's a fun story and a quote. But with it, so I'll put a link. I'll put this on the quote of the week little segment there in the show notes, and I'll put a link to Yuri's Facebook page because he put this on there. And underneath that, he has a video of people with their katanas cutting bamboo. And some people slice right through it like it's nothing. And some people get stuck in the first piece of bamboo, and they've got 4 or 5 of them lined up. And
so it's all technique.
Yeah, it is technique, but it's just funny to approach it from a messed up angle. But you got to see the video. If you're not already a fan of Yuri Simoes on the Facebook page there, go by and like it, or go by the show notes and find that link, and it's down there a few days. But you'll see people trying to cut bamboo, and some don't get it, and they're swinging plenty hard. People are swinging hard, and it's not cutting, and some people just swing smoothly and just slice through it like butter, Gary. So I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, and also, if you do like Yuri there, check out our we have actually had him on one of our shows on an interview, so check that one out. And just an incredible competitor.
Yep, a very motivated guy, and he's out there doing great things for jiu-jitsu. Gary, that takes us to the article of the week. And our friends at jujitsutimes.com have an article called How to Tap Out the Competition Jitters. So,
and I know we get a lot of questions about that. So I think just about everybody runs into this one. So we got a great article there.
Yeah, they have it. It's really broken down. It looks like into 3 different parts. Before you compete, during your match, and then after your match. Before you compete, they advise that you visualize a game plan. That's one of their points. They have multiple points, but that you visualize a game plan. And even if your game plan doesn't work at all, you go out there. Okay, I'm going to pull guard. I'm going to do a butterfly sweep, and I'm going to try to get mount and try to work for my top game or something. Whatever your plan is. Well, it may not work at all. They might pull guard and take your back right away. Who knows what's going to happen? But having that game plan should help you tap the competition jitters, Gary.
Definitely you need to tap the competition jitters. I like when he talks about during the match. First of all, you, like you said before, visualize your game plan. He did say arrive early, avoid caffeine drinks. But during the match, I think this is probably, in my opinion, the most important one. But I guess everybody's a little different. But breathe. And I think sometimes people forget to breathe. I mean, it sounds so basic, we're breathing to live. But, you've been learning how to relax while you roll. But it's easy to get caught up in the moment. You start using a lot of strength. You're not breathing. Your adrenaline's pumping. You're doing a ton of effort, but you're breathing shallow. You're not getting enough air in. And if you're not going to breathe properly, you're gonna tire quickly. And that's why it's good to have a coach there on the sidelines telling you breathe. It may sound so basic, but it'll definitely help you out.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that the competition will bring out sometimes in people. If you can remember back when you first started, you were breathing very hard to do almost nothing. And then you kind of revert back to that on the competition mat. Sometimes you might find yourself working very hard, and really I'm not doing anything. I remember just a few weeks ago rolling with a newer student, and he's got mount on me, and he's working extremely hard and doing nothing. Just holding mount, just hanging out. And I said, hey, you're in a good spot. Part of it is he knows I'm going to probably escape in a little bit. But I say, hey, you're in a good spot. Take a deep breath and think about what you're going to do, and you're in no hurry to do it. Try to, and it's hard to do that in a competition, but it's really a way to kind of control yourself just by trying to control your breathing a little bit more. And as you get more time on the mat, as you get more experience, and you realize that we're not, life and death match here, usually, Gary.
Usually, and I know we've talked about this before, but I am actually 13-27 in death matches.
Hang in there, you'll pick that back up. I know you'll do. You'll get back to a better record pretty soon, Gary.
Hopefully.
Yeah, you've been screwed by the judges a couple of times, and and that one of those guys just had an unfair advantage on you. I don't know what was going on there, but his gi was like soaked in oil or something. It was weird.
Yeah, but I'll check next time.
Going on through the article here, they've got multiple points we're skipping, and we'll put a link to this in the show notes if you're really wanting to tap your competition jitters. Go ahead and read the whole article after the match. And there's a couple of things here, Gary. What stands out to you?
After the match, I really like his first point, befriend the people you fought against. And I just think that's so great. A lot of times, first of all, you're going to just make a new friend, which is always important. But secondly, that gives you another person to train with. How many times have you met somebody and, they may be from another town or, 2 hours away, but you go out and visit and train at their place, learn some new stuff. And even if you go to a tournament, you may see that person again, and you may not have a teammate or a coach there. And how many times has that person have you ended up using somebody they competed against to corner you? So I just think it's very important to befriend the people you've went up against.
Yeah, back in the day when I was competing, I always made a point to talk to the person after the match and find out where they're from and where they train and why they beat me so badly. But no, but really, this is a good point. Let's say I don't know. Let's just call this guy Garrietta, and we go out there, we roll, and we have a good match, and Garrietta ends up catching me in a straight ankle lock. I go up there and I talk to this Garrietta, and this is a terrible name, but I make a little friend. I say, where are you from? Where you train? You get to know them, and it is important to say that not everybody's up for this. Like Gary might just this guy might say, "Oh, I'm from this gym. See you later. Leave me alone. I'm not doing my thing." But a lot of them will open up and get to know you a little bit, and then and they're normal people. Like that's what he's not a crazy guy. Yeah, he beat me, whatever. But next time you might compete with him again, and this person is a normal person. They're not going to try to murder you. It's going to be a safe match. You win or lose the first time, you're going to have a fun time with this person. And that to me, that takes away some of the jitters. Well, you look at your bracket. I've competed with some of the same people more than once. And the second time, I wasn't any less like expecting of a good match, but I knew that, hey, I don't know these other guys, but this guy is going to be a fun roll. And they're not going to crank my head off or Kimura me till Wednesday. But that's just kind of my thought about getting to know people, and it does. It's a fun way to kind of network a little bit too.
Yep, I think that's awesome. But definitely check out the article, How to Tap Out the Competition. It's on Jiu-Jitsu Times. We'll put a link to it on the show notes. And it looks like it's from May 12th by Avery Clements. And I hope I said your name right. But great article. Check it out, and it'll definitely help you tap out the competition jitters.
There you go. That's hey, at least if you don't tap anybody else out, you could always tap out the jitters possibly.
Yeah, so no matter what you want.
That might be the hardest thing to tap out of the day.
That really, I think, is probably the hardest thing to tap out. A lot of times you may go into a tournament and you tap your way all the way to the podium, but you were nervous and you had trouble tapping. You didn't tap out the jitters, but that's normal. You always just have to remember this is normal.
Yeah, and that goes to the last point that they make, just to bring it up real quick. Compete more often, you'll be less nervous. And I think that is true.
Yep, definitely. Byron, I think we should get to the meat and potatoes of our show. Michael Ginn, he's got a book out, The Science of Submission.
He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
He has never gotten a paper cut. He blocks it on a microscopic level. Rather than telling an opponent how poor their BJJ skills are, he simply buys them a BJJ audiobook to help them out. He once put a chokehold on a honey badger and got a pint of honey. It was a sweet move.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Michael Ginn to the BJJ Brick podcast. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, I'm excited to have you on the show. You have a new book out, The Science of Submission, a principle-based approach to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A lot of good details in this book, and we're going to get into those a little bit. But before we get into the book, I want to learn more about you, Michael. Tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a personal history.
I'm a fourth-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I also have a black belt in Judo. I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the summer of 1991, so it was long before the first UFC. I know a lot of people have gotten into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because they saw Royce Gracie in the UFC, but I got into it even before that. So when I was in high school, I studied some Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I'd been watching a lot of Steven Seagal movies, and I wanted to wrist lock the heck out of people. And so I found this Japanese style of jiu-jitsu, and what's kind of funny is that back then I specifically said, I don't want to do any of that wrestling around stuff. So like I said, I was watching Steven Seagal movies, I want to do that. And so I found a style of Japanese jiu-jitsu, got all the way up to brown belt, one step from black belt, and then I graduated high school and I went down to college in San Diego. Down in San Diego, I tried to look for the same style, hoping to continue it, maybe pursue getting my black belt, but I couldn't find anything. So I tried a lot of different martial art classes that were offered at the university. Couldn't really find anything that I liked, so I tried a self-defense class. And the self-defense class mixed a lot of different martial arts together, including Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I got a taste of stand-up stuff, clinch work, ground work, and even though I dabbled in a lot of the different arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really struck a chord with me. To be blunt, I felt it was just so easy in the sense of I could learn a little bit, and then I would ask somebody, "Hey, you want to grapple?" And then I would tap them out, and I'm like, "Wow, I didn't really have to practice that much. This stuff really works. This stuff's amazing." I was, like I said, dabbling around in different arts and studying those arts too. But I felt like, if, for example, if you took boxing for 6 months, and then you grabbed a buddy and said, within the confines of boxing, you put on gloves, you come at me as hard as you want, and let's box. I don't think with 6 months of boxing training you might do so great. I mean, your likelihood of getting hurt is quite high. But I felt like something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was like, man, I can train like 6 months. I can tell my friend within the confines of the grappling, come at me as hard as you want. And I'm like, I can win. This is amazing stuff. So, I wasn't a big guy. Right now I'm 6'1", 175. I mean, when I was 17 years old, I mean, it's funny, I look at my license, I was 5'11", 135 pounds. I mean, I was like light like the girls here, And so, to feel the power of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was just amazing to me. And it really didn't take long for me to learn that the Japanese style of Jiu-Jitsu that I didn't really work when it came to real resistance. I would try to grab somebody's wrist lock, and they would just stiffen up. And then my excuse a lot of times, which you hear, well, if I kicked you in the groin first or I jabbed you in the eye, then it could have worked. And but for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I didn't have to say these things. It didn't matter how much they resisted. You'd make them submit. So, like I said, I really took a liking to it. And eventually I graduated college. Once again, I was down in UC San Diego and moved back up to Northern California. After a few years, I was a purple belt at that time. And after a few years, I decided to open up my own school in San Jose, California. And I was a brown belt by that time. I did that for 5 years, and then I just kind of got tired of teaching the public. I was doing a lot of everything, when it came to running the school. I was the owner, the manager, the salesperson, the janitor, the kids teacher, the kickboxing teacher, the jiu-jitsu teacher. And I mean, I was exhausted. And eventually the business side became very frustrating for me. And after about 5 years, I decided that I wanted to make a change in my life. Jiu-jitsu was something that I enjoyed so much, but I started to get this feeling like, man, I just really don't like what I'm doing. And I love jiu-jitsu so much, I didn't want it to turn into something I hated. So I decided to close my doors when it came to my school. I took a handful of dedicated students and said, I'm training you in my garage. If you want to get good, I'll help you. But, I just want to teach those who were serious about learning. I didn't want to be a cheerleader anymore. I didn't want to be a salesman anymore. And I did that for the next decade. In 2001, I earned my black belt from Joe Moreira. And for the longest time, like I said, I kept to myself and a small group of students in my garage. But eventually, I think after a decade of just training with the same handful of students, I kind of got bored. I'm like, man, I want to start rolling with different people. So even for myself, I started to kind of just stopping by different schools in the local area. And, just like I said, just to get some different training partners. And one of my students who had been with me for a long time, he really thought I had something of value as when it came to what I taught. and he basically said, he saw that I was kind of getting antsy of just training with them in the garage, and he's like, what would you say to if we opened a school, but you didn't have to deal with any of the business side, and all you have to do is teach, and that's all you had to worry about. And he's like, I'm just speaking hypothetically. And I'm like, well, hypothetically, that'd be cool. I mean, I'd love that there. And it's funny because that hypothetical little question, 1 week later, he's like, let's get the ball rolling, and that led to us opening Smash Gyms in Sunnyvale, California. And a couple of years later, we opened a second location in San Jose. And then now we are working on a third location in Milpitas in our local area. So, that one little hypothetical question just kind of branched into now something so much bigger.
It's funny how that some things grow like that. You mentioned that it seemed like it was fairly easy for you to pick up jiu-jitsu and that it just worked for you. I kind of want to learn a little bit about that. Is this such a time that nobody else is training really, so that the people who taught you it, that they knew it obviously, but when you're actually doing it to people, they had no idea what you were doing, so it was very easy? Or was jiu-jitsu just something that you were naturally picking up and you could do that amongst other people that were also training?
Yeah, back then, nobody knew jiu-jitsu. I said you have to remember back then we were you're looking at 1991. The internet was in its infancy. When I first learned about the internet in college, we were using like Unix, and I'm like, what is the big deal about this internet thing? And I think the first browser was Netscape or something like that, right? And so it's not like it is now. I mean, everybody can find everything about jiu-jitsu here. There was very, very few schools around. I was down in San Diego, and at that time, San Diego has tons of black belts now. At that time, there was nobody down in San Diego, and we had to drive from San Diego to LA to train with jiu-jitsu black belts. So there was really nobody around. Just to grapple, I mean, I would take the self-defense class once a week, and that was my time to, like I said, I was first exposed to jiu-jitsu. In the meantime, I was trying to find anybody that I could roll with, anybody who wanted to spar. I tried to find people in the Hapkido class, you wrestle, okay, judo class, anybody. So, yeah, in a way, jiu-jitsu seemed easy because nobody knew it. Right? It was when the only videos we had back then was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action 1. And you pretty much can see from the early UFCs, like UFC 1, when somebody doesn't know Jiu-Jitsu, and you don't have to be a black belt to toy with them. I mean, you got a decent blue belt by the time. Handling people who don't know it is quite easy. So that was my main attraction to it. So no, it definitely wasn't like I was some sort of a phenom or anything like that there. It's just that nobody else knew it at the time, and people were very reluctant to accept it. Remember, this was the days that the Gracies had to use their challenges to get the word out. Now, judo people and jiu-jitsu people, they're merging together, and the jiu-jitsu people, we need to learn judo, and the judo people, we need to learn some jiu-jitsu. Same thing with the wrestlers. There was none of that. Everybody was very separated. Nobody really wanted to it was kind of us versus them type of mentality there. So yeah, it was, I said there was very few people learning it, so it was very easy to take advantage of their lack of knowledge.
Michael, when did you start to apply like a scientific approach to your jiu-jitsu?
The science didn't come till much, much later. I think I always had an analytical approach to jiu-jitsu because of the instructors that influenced me. But the science came really within the past half decade, actually. So this wasn't really something that I had pre-black belt. What led to this scientific approach and different view It wasn't intentional. It first came about actually from the fact that when I was 19 years old, I just started, within the first 2 years of my jiu-jitsu career, I had horrible back pain, and I ended up getting what later I found out was a bulging disc in my low back. And my back was killing me, and I saw chiropractors. It did help some, but I was in pain for the next 12 years, I'd say, till my early 30s. And in my early 30s, I felt that something was very, very wrong with my body. I had grown, not only have chronic sciatic pain, I never used to have knee pains when I ran, and I started having knee pains. I had chronic neck pain. I wanted to kind of twist and pop my neck like 50 times a day. I was getting weird muscle strains and pulls every 2 weeks, and I realized I just felt something was very, very wrong with my body. I was in my early 30s, but I felt like I was a senior citizen, and I kind of felt that if I continued down this path, and 20 years down the road, I'm going to be crippled. Was I still training? Yes, I just suck up the pain. I kind of said it reminded me of Yoda, right? Yoda, you see him hobbling with the cane there in those early Star Wars movies, right? He's hobbling on the cane.
Yep.
He can barely walk, but then when it's time to fight, he goes out and does it, and right when he finishes, he goes back to hobbling on the cane. And that's what I felt like. And so since I felt something was very wrong with my body, and so I started to kind of rethink of how to repair myself. And what am I doing wrong? Or what have I done and not done? So I began to explore every possibility out there when it came to any sort of therapy, alternative methods, because really standard medical treatment had failed me. I seen the neurosurgeon and took their advice and went to physical therapy, and none of that stuff helped. And I saw chiropractors, but still my body was still falling apart. And eventually I thought of this thing that I came across when I was 19. There was this exercise posture therapy called muscle balance and function that the chiropractor I went to when I was 19 years old, he had recommended that I try. And so I did. I tried it. It fixed all my problems. But I didn't really understand that therapy at that time. So once I felt better, I stopped doing it. But of course, I continued to do all the things that caused the problems. And slowly all these problems eventually came back. But they came back in such a gradual manner that it was a long time had passed, and I completely forgot about that therapy. And so, of course, later on, like I said, when I'm in my 30s, I finally, hey, that's one thing I remember that worked for me. So I called him up, and he referred me to Jeffrey Gluckman. Jeffrey Gluckman was the man who created the muscle balance and function system. And so I contacted Jeff. I met up with him. Now, here's the funny thing. When I met up with him, I did not realize that he was actually the therapist that I met when I was 19 years old. Until he met me again. He was he sat down, he was writing some stuff down and putting together a program for me. And the way that he sat there in his demeanor, I said to myself, I've seen this before. And I'm like, hey, didn't we meet when we were 19? And yeah, he's like, yeah, we did. And so I had this, the posture therapy done on me again, or I did the posture therapy again, and it was amazing. It fixed every chronic problem and pain that I have. I had suffered for over the past decade. And I was so amazed by the results that I was referring a lot of my friends and students. I'm like, you guys have to do this. This stuff is so amazing. And my wife said to me, you've always been interested in the healing arts in addition to martial arts. Why don't you learn how to become a practitioner in this posture therapy? And I kind of said to myself, I said, I don't like to half-ass anything. So if I do it, I want to be very, very good at it. And I don't know if I'm at a point in my life that I'm willing to make that commitment. So I just kept referring friends, but my wife kept really encouraging me. And about maybe 6 months later, I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to do it. I want to learn how to become a practitioner in this system and learn how to do this. So I went through all the educational courses, started taking on clients, and the miraculous results that I felt on my own body, I started to be able to reproduce with other people. And this was very, very eye-opening for me. It was very life-changing in my understanding of the human body. Now, through this educational course, I started to look at jiu-jitsu differently. I started to notice, I'm like, wait a second. If I can fix the human body by rebalancing it, by redoing, basically making the alignment, right, the way it should be, what happens if we do the opposite? And it basically occurred to me that every submission hold, sweep, takedown, everything that we do in grappling is about misaligning posture. And I started to realize, like, grappling, this battle of grappling that we have between us and our opponents, each person is forcefully trying to misalign the opponent's posture, right? And so when I started to realize this, I started to take the principles that I use to heal people, and I started to reverse them, and then started to really examine them. And I'm like, wow, this is how everything works on a much deeper level. And so after that began to happen, every technique that I learned in jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, I saw in a completely different light. And that's really where that scientific approach kind of came from. Once again, I was analytical before, but to have the concrete science behind it and to understand it at that level, at that depth, it wasn't until I had that education in the MBF system.
And this ultimately brought you to this book. Could you explain the purposes of your book? Like, what was your goal behind writing it?
Yeah, well, when I initially began to figure these things out, the scientific principles behind the techniques, and I tried to explain to people why it worked, what I had noticed was that the terminology that I used, the way that the things that I said, a lot of people didn't understand. My students understood because they saw me on a daily basis. I would use this kind of terminology and explain it in depth to them. But when I took it to other people without that background, I had so many people just basically said, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like big words that meant nothing. And so it had been suggested to me that I write a book and go into more depth. And as I mentioned before, I don't like to half-ass anything. I'm like, man, a book is a lot of work. Personally, I think writing books is way more work than making instructional videos or DVDs. And so I wasn't really sure if I was going to commit to that endeavor there. And so I let a lot of years pass by. I mean, but this was something that kind of lingered in the back of my mind. And as my understanding grew, and I think one day I kind of thought, I really want to offer something different to the jiu-jitsu community. I made instructional videos in the past, and when I made instructional videos in the past, I looked at what was currently on the market and said, hey, what can I do differently? What is not already out there? And when I thought about, after a decade had passed by, what can I offer the jiu-jitsu community that is different? Everybody can show a sweep or a submission that nobody's seen before. But when I thought about this stuff, I'm like, man, this kind of approach and way to look at jiu-jitsu is so unique and so different. I think this is what I want to present to really make an impact, to take the learning of jiu-jitsu to the next level. And so, I decided, okay, all right, I'm going to bear down and with Jeffrey Gluckman, we authored this book.
I really enjoyed. I have read the book. I should say that, I guess, before we get too much deeper into it. I enjoyed the book. It kind of breaks down the different parts of it. A lot of technique, but also at the beginning, you have a thing. It's just the terminology that you'll be using, and I was learning from that right there. Just the ideas behind some of the terminology and how that's going to relate to what I'm doing on the mat. Stuff like center line, and people have heard of the center of gravity, obviously, but where that's positioned. And so you do a really great job of explaining these early on. And so when you reference them, to me, it made a lot of sense as I was reading the book.
Yeah, that was something that there was a particular black belt that had read the book, and interestingly, for his job, he writes like technical manuals. And he said that he really liked the fact that I put the terminology in the beginning and not kind of like a glossary at the very end or an index at the end. And he says that really helps people understand, what it is that we're going to be talking about. But yeah, a lot of times, when I was trying to talk about this kind of material before, if I talked about counter rotation, the average person, when it comes to posture, they don't understand what the term counter rotation means. So in the book, of course, we talk about, well, it's when your hips and your shoulders are twisted in different directions, right? And but without that knowledge, if we keep saying that term and we don't explain it, then a lot of people are lost. So yeah, it was very, very intentional to put all those terms in the beginning, so everybody understood the context from which we were talking in the rest of the book.
Yeah, I'm really glad you did it that way. Another thing that kind of kept popping up to me is the importance of the angles that you have, and you do a great job of explaining how important certain angles are, and they reoccur throughout jiu-jitsu. So, 90-degree angle, or push it something at this angle has a huge effect versus if you're off a little bit on what you're going to get. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about how important some angles are?
Yeah, the human body, the posture of the human body, the original blueprint design is all based upon 90-degree angles. So, if you look from the front, the ankles, the knees, the hips, and the shoulders should all be vertically aligned, and they should also make 90-degree angles to every other joint, right? So the structure, the blueprint is already there, and so when taking this knowledge, you can apply it to jiu-jitsu, right? When you are trying to be mechanically as strong as possible, you want as many of these 90-degree angles between the joints as possible, right? So you take the opposite of that there, then we want with our opponent, as many of the 90-degree angles to disappear. And that's basically what the battle in jiu-jitsu is about. Yeah,
and you have great examples and pictures in the book to really drive home the purpose of, or the importance of how the 90-degree idea is to the human body, and the amount of results that it could give you. And I always have heard, since starting jiu-jitsu, angle is a big deal. But having read this book, I understand why the angle is such a big deal sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's in the smallest things here. Like you see, for example, a lot of students when they collar choke somebody from the guard. Look at their shoulders. A lot of times a person will shrug one shoulder higher than the other as they're squeezing a collar choke. That there, you have now eliminated some of the 90-degree angles in your own body as the person applying the choke, right? When you actually relax your both shoulders down, keep your shoulders even, and you look at now between your shoulders and hips, you have all the 90-degree angles. So a lot of times people don't realize that little bit of shrugging your right shoulder up as you're squeezing down the choke, it's actually weakening your application of the choke. So, it's kind of interesting on a side note, when I talk to people about when people talk about strength training, for example, in relation to jiu-jitsu, I look at strength in such a different way. I said, well, let's first look at what it is that you're doing. We see a lot of people who, for example, they're like, oh, I want to get stronger at my gi chokes, so I'm going to do pull-ups on pull-ups with the gi, work my grip and work the pull-ups. to me, I'm like, well, why don't you just even your shoulders out, and then biomechanically you're stronger, and you don't have to, you don't have to go lift some weights there, right? You have made your body, once again, biomechanically stronger, even though you have not increased the amount of muscle mass in your body. I think a lot of people, especially starting off, they feel like they need to be stronger, but to me, that's like you have this misalignment in your body, but you're lifting weights and still doing the technique with poor body mechanics and alignment there. If you just correct the mechanics and the alignment, you wouldn't really need you wouldn't feel as if you were not strong enough.
I think a similar example would be the feeling that somebody is so much faster than you when they're actually moving the same speed. They're just anticipating what you're going to do because they've been there so many more times than you, or maybe you're into their game, and it's like, this guy is so fast, and he's not that much faster, or not faster at all. They're not that much stronger, or maybe stronger at all than you. It's just they're doing things in the strength example with the proper angle and leverage, and with the speed angle, they know where you're going to go, so they're already waiting for you there. It's just it gives the perception that somebody might be a lot stronger than they actually are because they're doing things properly.
Exactly, right? Sometimes a person may seem faster, but the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. They may be moving in a straight line, and that gives you the illusion while you're moving in this meandering arc.
Yeah,
and that makes them feel like they're faster, or they just have good timing, right? And that gives the illusion of speed. And one of my black belts had mentioned to me or somebody had mentioned to me how I move very quickly. I'm like, I really don't think I move that fast. And in comparison to another one of our students who was a wrestler, who was really explosive, I'm like, I do not think I'm a half as good an athlete as he is when it comes to explosiveness and speed. And he's like, no, he goes, your movements are more efficient. That makes you feel faster. And his movements are less efficient, but he is able to compensate by moving his body faster than you. So, definitely that when you more technique and, like I said, more greater efficiency, greater timing, then that's what jiu-jitsu is about, right? It's not necessarily about being, stronger and faster, because those attributes will not last forever.
Yeah. So looking at the book, the first, third or maybe a quarter or so of the book is really like setting down these really good ideas about what we're going to talk about, jiu-jitsu wise and getting them related. I think those ideas could be applied to basically any sport, definitely any combat sport where there's another person in front of you that you're dealing with. But, any sport that you're wanting your body to do its best, if you want to try to look at how it actually works and why it's working that way, I think that the first part of this book is a good start for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. I came from originally a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, primarily a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. I figured these principles out. It really helped me when it came to problem solving, creating techniques, and then I was able to take this and apply it to judo, to wrestling, moves that I had no extensive background on. So a wrestling instructor would show me, and I can understand the biomechanics, and it really helped me speed up my ability to absorb these techniques. With judo, I'm able to look at a video of a world champion doing a variation of a throw that I had never seen before. And I would watch it and I would start experimenting and understanding, I'm like, this is the biomechanics of how it works. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Many, many years ago, I would travel to Slovakia. I had a student there, and we would give seminars to the Slovakian Special Forces. And many of those people there, we taught them jiu-jitsu, but they had a lot of problems with their body. And we also introduced the MBF posture therapy system to them, and it helped a lot of them with the pains and aches that were in their body. And one of the leaders of the Special Forces team, the head of the Special Forces team, began to understand more and more about these principles of posture. And I don't know exactly what he did because I'm not, I wasn't with him, but this is what was told to me, was that he took these principles and started to make alterations to like their shooting stances and the way they position their bodies and everything like that to make it more efficient and structurally stronger when doing what they do. So I thought it was very, very interesting how I applied it to grappling, but he just took that and applied it to shooting. And so absolutely, I mean, any physical activity you can start applying these principles to and either understand how they work or take what you're doing and make it more efficient.
Yeah, and that's really the first, 20 or so pages of the book. After that, it gets into a lot of jiu-jitsu techniques, and you have a really helpful way of breaking down the techniques. How did you decide which techniques to include in the book?
So once again, I wanted to present something that was different. So one thing that I knew wasn't different is the idea of just showing techniques people have never seen before. No matter how long you've been training in jiu-jitsu, somebody can always show you a technique that you've never seen before, that, some ooh and ah, impressive looking technique. And that's not the direction that I wanted to go. I wanted to pick techniques that everybody understood. A basic hip bump, a basic, how to just, when you're staying on the mount. Any white belt should look at every technique that we show in the book and say, yes, I've seen that before. So I want to take something very common and say, okay, everybody knows this. You're all familiar with it. Now let me break it down so you can see these basic techniques in a completely different light, right? So I didn't want to take something that people didn't understand because then everybody couldn't relate to it. They couldn't understand how it works. But if I take the most common thing, when you're on the mount here, and biomechanically, why do certain things work better than others? Just crossing your ankles, having somebody in your guard. What is biomechanically better, and what is not there? So it was very, very intentional that I wanted it to be techniques that almost like you would pretty much learn in almost every school. Every instructor and every jiu-jitsu player has a different style, but these were such basic techniques that pretty much a majority of people would see this and be able to relate to it.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job with that. These are techniques that basically everybody would recognize and be able to identify with, but then you dive deeper with the techniques. You have like a part of the technique will mention like biomechanical keys. What are you trying to pick up on that section of each technique?
All right, so I basically take each technique and explain how the principles that we discussed in the first half of the book apply to the second half of the book. So a lot of this, the first half was just the theory and explain it. I would give some examples, but they weren't necessarily all examples specific to jiu-jitsu. So the second part was really just saying, okay, you understand the theory. Now this is the application, very, very specific to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I just take that pattern and I repeat it for every single technique. Now, eventually what you begin to see in that pattern, you see a pattern repeat itself over and over. And the goal then is for the reader to say, okay, I've seen it applied for this technique for the guard, this technique for the guard. Now you take that knowledge and you apply it to any sweep, any submission. And techniques that aren't in the book but you're familiar with, and say, okay, how do I take those principles and apply it to this? And once, especially those who are instructors, I feel that they're able to take this knowledge and really apply it to more than what was just presented in the book.
You have so many great examples of things that everyone has seen before, and then you break them down in the scientific way and explain them. After you get done reading the book, I'm looking at techniques that aren't in the book in my own game and wondering, okay, where are the angles here? How is this happening? And what could I do to make it better? And then you also have a section, common mistakes for each technique. And you're really making me evaluate what I'm doing that's violating one of these principles that I could maybe clean up and make it a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. There's that saying that if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him how to fish, you feed him forever, right? He's able to eat forever. So this is really designed to teach you how to fish yourself. Like I said, especially as black belts, a lot of black belts, once they get to a certain level and then you open up your own school, you may not be next to your instructor on a daily basis like you were when you were a blue belt. Or you might be in a situation that you're in one state, but your instructor's in another. And the information that is in this book really helps you problem solve and analyze and figure things out on your own. I think that a lot of the principles when I was coming up in the ranks were much more general. Like, okay, when you're passing guard, you need to be tighter. Well, what does that mean? It's like no space, or you need to give space here. I mean, I felt a lot of the principles that I was going through before were much more general there. And this helps you understand much more specifically and in much more concrete terms. And I think it's an incredibly invaluable tool for anybody who wants to study jiu-jitsu on a more intellectual level, but especially for the higher level, the practitioners. We've seen a lot of things come out on the market and they say it's advanced. I mean, really, what is the definition of advanced there? I mean, anybody can show you something flashy that you've never seen before. I mean, does that really qualify as advanced? And I think, to me, what is the true black belt secrets, I think you hear Rickson talk about like the invisible jiu-jitsu, right? The subtle little details. And you have somebody like Rickson, he just shows it on very basic things, right? We always hear about those stories about like Rickson going to some seminar and has everybody mount him, and he just does oompa and just rolls them off, and every black belt, and nobody can stop him. Like, to me, those things are the true secrets to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it's like, how do we understand that there? And I think that the material in the book gives that. It doesn't necessarily give you. I'm not saying that you read this book, you're going to understand Rickson, everything Rickson does. My point is that it gives you a starting point to look at jiu-jitsu in a different light, and that can help you better understand what people like him are doing.
Do you think that this book will cut down maybe on the learning curve of some things and help people avoid some common mistakes?
I definitely think so. I think that I think Americans have really changed the way that, and has continued to change the way that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is taught. I mean, if you think about this, originally Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there was not much organization. It's like you come to class, the teacher just shows a bunch of random techniques, you roll, and you just figure it out by countless hours of mat time. And I think once Jiu-Jitsu came to the United States, and as time passed, a lot of Americans are like, man, we want structure, we want curriculum, we want some order and organization in these things. So the instructors had to change. And I think that as time passes, more and more people, they want to look at jiu-jitsu on a more intellectual level. Now, I'm not saying everybody does. I think that in the beginning, when you're a white belt, this kind of information is useful. But in the beginning, just get in class, train, learn the techniques here. Don't worry too much about it on a deeper level here. But as you progress, I definitely think this kind of material can speed up the learning process. I definitely know for me it would have helped a lot, because back in the early 90s, if I didn't know how to do a choke, I had no principles to follow. I would just squeeze your neck in every different ways and just hold, is this right? Is this right? Well, that's pretty tough on my partner. Just countless hours just squeezing and just hoping I stumble across the right answer. So, but yeah, I think that there's more and more people who are interested in taking that approach. I think that there's more people as jiu-jitsu grows who are older, whose body cannot handle, well, I'm only going to learn through thousands of hours of rolling because my body can't handle it anymore. So while I am going to roll, maybe I got to spend a little more time using my mind so I don't have to just solely learn from using my body. And so yeah, as I said, I think that those kind of people, this material will definitely help them.
I like that example of not having to. I mean, obviously you need mat time and that sort of thing, but a lot of us are older, and we can't just put ourselves through countless hours of training, and we still want to become good at jiu-jitsu, or as good as we can. And so some of this off-the-mat training could help supplement that. So you've been...
Definitely.
Go ahead, sorry.
I don't know if you've noticed in your personal training, but I definitely notice as mine and my instructors. Have you ever noticed that you tend, it's for us who are, our lives are jiu-jitsu, that you figure out a lot of stuff when you're injured, when you're not training?
Yeah, you've got to just work around it, and
your mind works.
And it'll change things.
Like I sometimes find, and I find this with many of my black belts, that we sometimes figure out more when we're not training now, because it's almost like when we're injured, we have nothing else to do. We can't get out there and roll. So our brains, it's like your other senses heighten, right? It's like a person goes blind, and their hearing and their sense of smell and their sense of touch heightens. It's like when you're a black belt and then you get injured. Oh, I can't use my body, but then your mind just starts expanding even more, and you can figure out way more there. And it's kind of a funny and interesting thing that it's definitely happened to me, and I see it happen to a lot of black belts. So when a lot of these black belts, when they read this material, and they get injured, I mean, they can take this and it just turbocharges that thought process that's already going on in their head.
Yeah, I agree, and I've definitely felt that from some injuries I've dealt with, and your mind will look for the outlet that it wants to find, and if you have enough experience, or you have maybe a coach that can help you adapt your game, sometimes these limitations will help you in the long term. And
definitely.
So it's really amazing thing that could happen for the long-term development of someone's game. And sometimes these injuries could be long-term, or you could not do that technique. I'm done with this technique. I'm putting it away. I get hurt doing that. And then you have to find ways that get you the same result, but a different technique maybe.
Yeah, and speaking of injuries, this knowledge can also decrease your chance of injury too. Now I'm not saying that you'll be injury free. We do a combat sport. Actually, regardless of combat sport, we are physically active, and as long as you're physically active, there is the chance of injury. It doesn't matter whether you're biking or playing basketball or martial arts. But there's a lot of times in which students unintentionally injure themselves, or they exert force when they're in a biomechanically weak position, and that's actually what causes some of their injuries. So, for example, I had a lot of back problems. A thing I used to do was, I would put somebody in the arm bar or the triangle. I'd put somebody in the triangle and arm bar, and they're stacking me. I remember putting people in triangle. My own knee is to my nose here. They're stacking hard, and I'm squeezing. I'm like, I'm getting that tap here, right? I might get the tap, and then I go home. I'm like, man, my neck is not feeling good here. I'm being stacked in an arm bar. My quads are practically to my chest, and I'm trying to arch out from there. I mean, that's horrible for your body, right? It is. Now I know a lot better. I know not to do these kind of things. I'm not saying that I don't get stacked. I know not to exert a high amount of power in those kind of positions. Let me give you an example here.
Okay.
You remember in the book I had that the example of the guy doing squats, let's say with a barbell.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yep, absolutely.
Right? And we talked about that misalignment. Like if you were to take a lot of weight and you were to twist your body in one direction and then tilt it there, right? How the more, and then maybe we would, maybe cause the feet to lean inwards or whatever like this here. The more deviations we put in the body, right, you could see that if you try to hold that weight up, you're going to get injured, right? Do you remember this part of the book there? Right. Okay.
Very, very memorable part of the book because it's so important.
Right. Now, if we take that idea, how do we, when we have a lot of weight and our body is in that tweaked, messed up, misaligned positions, what is it we should we just power it back up? No, right? One of two things. If my shoulders were twisted and my upper body was twisted in relation to my lower body, I should not try to squat straight up from that position. One thing I should probably do is maybe untwist my body first, and then when I'm in a straight position, then I squat and stand up straighter. Does that make sense there?
Yes.
Right? Or let's say I'm twisted, I'm bent over, I'm all this kind of stuff. But then what do I need to do? I just need to relax and let the weight drop, right? Those two things are probably what you should do, not power it up from this messed up position. So if you think of that in regards to jiu-jitsu, if you're in an extremely misaligned position, your body is twisted and bent, it is not a good time to start power bridging out of something here. You're going to hurt yourself. That's when you go, oh, I strained my back. Oh, I popped a rib or something like that there, right? Now, so a lot of times, if I am stuck in a position that is very awkward, I start thinking about my posture, the alignment of my posture, and I'm like, first thing is just like the weight, I got to relax. Because if I start doing high exertion, this is like trying to lift that weight from a very, very bad position here. So I try to relax, and then what I do is I try to slowly squirm and try to realign my body. Now, once my body's realigned, most likely that I'm in a biomechanically stronger position, then I can exert more force and apply whatever move that I want. But like I said, if you understand, I mean, people naturally do this when it comes to lifting weights, right? They feel the weight's too heavy, they're like, I got to drop it here, right? Because they know if I try harder, I'm going to hurt myself. You basically take that same principle and apply it to jiu-jitsu. You may be able to decrease your chances of like straining your back or your neck or something like that there.
Wow, that's a great example of right out of the book, basically, of how important it is to have aligned posture, and I really like don't freak out if you're in a bad spot. Don't try to exert yourself. That's good advice we could use today. And so you could you're getting stacked, in class today. Maybe it's time to try to address being stacked before you try to finish the triangle, or at least dump a ton of energy into that triangle.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like, excuse me, for the black belts, especially myself, that, I think one of the biggest concerns I see now as black belts, we get older, is injury. That's like the number one thing that we're all concerned about here. And I think that because of that has also changed my awareness when it comes to my own body. I'm much, much more aware of the position my body is in and its relation to possibly hurting me. I think when I was younger, I was less concerned about getting hurt and I was more concerned about winning. And that's all that mattered. So I didn't care what position my body was in. I'm going to squeeze or exert myself as hard as I can so I can win and get the tap. And I think my mentality has changed. And I actually wish that I had the mentality I had now. I wish I had it back when I was younger. I'd probably save a lot of, myself a lot of pain and damage when it came to my body. Yeah,
I'm with you. You only get one body, and try not to tear it up in your early years of jiu-jitsu, trying to discover what works and how important it is to get a single tap while training or any time.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely I have this a student of mine. He's a big guy, and he knows how to defend against the triangle very, very well. His excellent technique, and his build is naturally like, he's really thick, so his build's already kind of anti-triangle. And on top of that, he's and I tell my students this joke. I said, this guy, many, many years ago, I did like 4 triangle attempts on him. I only tapped him once out of the 4 attempts. But after that one time, my back was hurting so much that I said that one tap in training was not worth my week of back pain. So I never tried to triangle him ever again. Yeah. And when I was younger, I wouldn't have cared. I'm like, I got that one tap. That's all that matters. When I get older, I'm like, nah, that one tap is definitely not worth it there.
Yeah, I've been in many situations similar to that myself. So you've been teaching this kind of a scientific principle to people that come into your school and to all your students, of course. Let's say you've got somebody that has about 2 years of experience. They come in and they have the idea that you're learning techniques and we're training hard and we're rolling and we're making advancements in our games. But is there like a particular maybe a position or technique that will make them like really say like an aha moment? Like this is breaking it down scientifically that they typically will pick up maybe easier to see that how important some of the ideas are? Is there a certain position or technique that really brings that out of people?
No. Now, keep in mind, the book is a condensed version of all these principles that I teach. So when I teach a regular class, it's not like you're reading the book. It honestly would be kind of boring if every day was like that, and it would be above most people's heads. So if somebody was to learn from me, come to my classes and learn, I teach technique, and the principles are just sprinkled in here and there. So it's not really a lot of brain power to have to absorb it there. And once a person is more advanced, then I start talking in more depth and detail about it. But for most beginners, like I said, it's just, I don't go heavy into it. Like I said, it's there, they understand, it's sprinkled in what they were doing. But I think that for most beginners initially, jiu-jitsu it's physical. It's meaning that, right, they are trying to just remember, where do I put my hand, where do I put my foot, and what direction do I have to move here. And so I think that when you get to that intellectual level there, that you're looking at jiu-jitsu a little differently, you kind of have to have the technique part. I'm not saying it's like you have to be black belt level, but it has to be a little bit more second nature for you to be able to understand. Similarly, like if I start teaching students about strategy, I don't teach beginner students strategy because they already have a hard enough time just remembering what techniques do. When they're more advanced and the technique is more second nature, then we talk about strategy. So there generally isn't this one aha moment that I understand it, because like I said, it's just kind of slowly sprinkled into their training over a long period of time. But for the students that don't train with me, the book, like I said, is a condensed version, and I'm sure it's what it is. It's going to be one of those things that you read the book now, you understand, you have a certain understanding of it, and you go train, you apply the best you can, and maybe you let some time pass and you read it again, and it means something different to you, right? So, and that was kind of how my own discovery was. So it's not like I, in one shot, just understood everything. It just kind of, I knew the principle, but it just kind of grows on you over time.
Yeah, that makes sense the way you explained it. I really appreciate in the book there are many pictures of people doing techniques, but you've taken you put lines over maybe their spine or their arm or something, and it really highlights what's happening with certain angles and things. And now, as I'm grappling, I'm trying to imagine, okay, where would you put the line on my back now, and how would it look, and try to just make adjustments to my game.
Yeah, it's and over time, I think what's going to happen once you now are aware that this exists, it's going to make you much more conscious of your own body. You know, when my instructor Joe Moreira, he's in a position, he just puts his hand somewhere, I can feel what it is it's doing to me. I'm like, I don't like this deviation in my posture. I don't like it, So yeah, it definitely is going to open your mind to something different, and that translates to the feel that you have in your own body. I can definitely sense much smaller deviations in my posture and people's attempts to misalign my posture much more than I ever did in the past.
Are there any techniques or positions that you see in jiu-jitsu today that work just fine? Because I mean, we're not just doing like 1 + 1 = 2 type math here. I'm trying to choke somebody. So in theory, I could choke somebody and not have 100% of my leverage being applied perfectly to actually put them out. So are there any places in jiu-jitsu that violate a lot of these kind of rules or ideas and still work, but they could maybe work better if they did them differently? Or
yeah, I mean, one thing to kind of keep in mind, there's a saying that I have when it comes to practicing techniques. Like, you should practice as close to 100% perfect if possible, because when you go live, it's probably only going to look 85% perfect, but it'll still work. But if you practice 85% perfect, when you go live, it's going to be 65% perfect, and it's not going to work anymore. Now, every technique, is going to require some exertion of strength and effort there. And so the farther that you deviate from the principles, right? Like in the book, I don't want to give away too much, but there's 2 principles that you can apply when it comes to the application of chokes. The more you can apply those 2 principles, the less strength it's going to take. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to take no strength. Of course, so I, like for myself, I remember the traditional way that I did a basic collar choke there from the guard. And then I took these principles and then I figured out another variation. I'm like, wow, this takes a lot less strength to do. Now it doesn't mean the previous way was wrong. It still worked, but this other way took less strength. And on a side note, what was funny was I'm like, oh man, I figured this out. This is pretty cool. And then like I met up with my instructor, Joe Moreira, and somebody was asking him a question about collar chokes. And I saw the way my instructor moved. I'm like, hey, he's moving exactly how the way that I figured out there. So I mean, he just, for him, it's not he can explain. He just feels it in his body, and that's the way that he naturally moves there. So, but yeah, obviously, the principles that I explained are applied to every single technique. There is no technique that doesn't apply to. And the farther you deviate from that, the more physical attributes it then begins to take in order to accomplish your goal with that technique.
Wow, great job explaining that, and I really appreciate that. Michael, I appreciate you covering a lot of the book with us, and of course, they could go to scienceofsubmission.com to learn more about it, and there's a few pages of the book online there and more information about it. But I do want to get some coaching advice from you. I always want to have someone like you on the show. What advice would you give somebody who's going to do their first tournament?
That's a good question. The first thing there's two things that I would emphasize to a student who's about to do the first tournament. The first thing is that you should do it for yourself because you enjoy it. Don't go out there thinking, am I going to make my instructor look bad? Am I going to, I don't want to make my school look bad. Do it for yourself. Don't do it for other reasons, like what you think the instructor might think, or how it looks on the school. It's very, very important that once again, you just do it for you. You might think that, if I lose, it makes my coach look bad. Honestly, it doesn't matter. And realistically, if you think about this here, if you've competed, how many people that you can, especially if somebody's an avid competitor, majority of the people, you don't even know who they are and what school they're from, right? You might know one or two people if you've competed a lot, but most people aren't going to remember. It seems like a much bigger deal to the student than it is to anybody else there. And don't put that kind of pressure on you. I think your instructor will respect the fact that you're just getting out there, win or lose. Now, with that also being said, I think it's also good to put everything in perspective and not put so much pressure on yourself, in the sense that when you compete at that moment, it will feel like it's the biggest deal in your life. You're going to be nervous. You're going to have pressure on you. But just remember, in the grand scheme of things, that it doesn't matter. This is just one little step in your entire jiu-jitsu journey. If you commit your life to doing jiu-jitsu, when you're a black belt, do you think you're really going to start bragging about the white belt match that you won? Nobody's going to talk about that. You're probably going to forget there, right? I mean, to me, it's like if you were an Olympic level wrestler, you don't talk about what you won when you're in junior high. People would laugh at you there. Who's talking about that there? And so, like I said, I totally understand for that student. At that moment, it feels like it's the biggest thing. And if you win, that's awesome. But I think a lot of times students put too much pressure on themselves because they make it out bigger than it is. And this is the thing that I tell my sons too. My sons compete in judo a lot. And I tell them, I'm like, when you are an adult, none of you will brag about what you won when you were 10 years old. And in fact, they've competed so much, 99% of their matches are all a blur to me. I don't even remember what happened there. There's a few ones that are pretty memorable there, but yeah, like I said, it's so. My point with what I said is that I totally understand. The biggest thing for all students in the is the nerves, the pressure. But I'm just saying, just trying to take it all, look at the big picture of it, and try not to pressure yourself too much. Like I said, it's just one little step in this big journey.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I felt that nerves before as a grappler stepping out there and not knowing how it was going to happen. And, is my school going to be disappointed in me? Am my instructor going to be upset with what happens? Like you say, do your best, and it largely doesn't matter. Nobody will remember anything of what you've done. But as long as I'd recommend have good sportsmanship. Don't make a fool of yourself. Should things go one way or the other, don't act like a bad sport. That's, I guess, one way you could embarrass your school
absolutely.
Pretty easily. But other than that, go out there, have a good time. It's just one step in your journey. And then after that, get back on the mats and go back to training, win or lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody goes undefeated. The best people have always lost. And I see sometimes the other reason why some people have that mentality of I don't want to embarrass my school is sometimes what happens is at your gym, you may have this one superstar competitor or a couple of them. And these guys are super good and they win a lot of stuff. And then when you go out there and compete, you feel like, man, I got to do just as well as these guys do. Or else am I going to shame my school? I'm like, no, don't worry about everybody's journey is their own there. Don't worry about what these people did. Don't feel like you have to match what they did. Just, like I said, just focus on yourself and just go out there and have fun. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And you and I knows this as black belts, as instructors here. A small number of people actually make it to black belt. So sometimes you might look at your teammates and say, "Man, these guys are so good. These guys are winning. I got to do as well." Don't worry about them because who knows whether they're still going to be around 10, 15 years from now. They could be gone, and you're still going there. And that's what really matters. It's what happens in the long run. So yeah, I said, but I totally understand where this pressure comes from, though.
Yeah. So looking at the people who stick around, can you maybe identify a personality trait that you'll see in somebody that makes you think that they're going to stick around for the long term?
I think it's very hard because, at first you might say, well, if somebody really loves it, but I think that you see a lot of people who I actually get worried. I'll tell you this. I get worried about the people who come in, they're gung-ho, and they want to train 5-6 days a week. That's who I worry about because I've seen a lot of those people, they fizzle out real quick, so I think the people who kind of take it slow and steady, to be honest with you, when I look at my people that I've promoted to black belt, now I'm sure this will change there, as more my students come up in rank. But the first group of initial black belts, it's not they were like superstar athletes. They weren't like Division I wrestlers, national champion judo players, superstar whatever sports. They're all average people, and we just had a love for it, and we just enjoyed it there. And I think every instructor will see that guy come in who's got the grappling background, who's got the superstar attributes, and think, man, this is the next guy to make it to black belt. Those are people those actually are very, very few. I'm not saying there are. Of course there are. But a vast majority of people are those average guys. And sometimes, if you really think about it, sometimes the average guys that don't really don't stand out on your radar as an instructor, those are the guys who actually train the most consistently. You just don't notice them as much. There's guys that come day in, day out. They might not be the most talented. And a lot of those guys are the ones that end up progressing in the ranks, while the super talented ones end up, disappearing there. But I think that it's It's tough to tell because really it's about commitment. I have this joke I always say that like if it takes 10 years to get to black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's a 10-year commitment. I said, most marriages nowadays don't even last that long. So it's I don't know. I don't know if there's necessarily one particular factor that you could see in anybody there, but yeah. So
you've been training for so long, and you started so long ago. What was it like when you were a blue belt? What were you like? Maybe the times like, and just take us back a little bit to your blue belt days.
I tell every one of my blue belts now that if they met me when I was a blue belt, they would kick my ass so easily. The quantity and quality of the information they are getting now is so superior to what we were doing back then. I mean, for example, when I first got my blue belt there, we had no concept of open guard. We didn't even know what that was. Okay. We didn't know, I wasn't really taught much pinning. I actually had to go to the UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego library, looking up books on wrestling and judo to learn how to pin. The amount of information that students have now is incredible in comparison to what we had back then. And like I said, there's just vast. I mean, we were mat tough. I mean, one thing about us back then, when I first started jiu-jitsu, I was never into competitions. I thought jiu-jitsu was just what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and Action 1 was. It was fighting kung fu, karate guys, boxers, wrestlers. That's what I thought jiu-jitsu was. A vast majority, 99% of my training was done no gi. I'm like, well, what is this gi thing for? So I had no idea about any concept in regards to competition. But when competitions began to appear, there was no Masters division, Masters 1, 2, 3. I mean, they used to have, I call it seniors or anything like that there. Everybody just went with everybody else. I mean, one thing that, I have a ton of respect for are a lot of the old school guys, because you would never, ever hear once of them complain about their age. It didn't matter if you're 40, 50, you just roll with the 20-year-olds. You just went for it there. I look back then, I was like 20, when I got my black belt, I was 27. So when I was a blue belt, right, I was like 19 years old. I mean, looking back, I have so much respect for those guys there. I'm like, man, those guys who are blue, purple belt, and they were rolling and competing with we might not have the technique, but those were some tough guys back then. And said I have a ton of respect looking back now, especially as I get older and my body is just not like it was before, with injuries and everything like that there. So, but yeah, like I said, the students nowadays, they are so lucky. I think if I had the resources that, it took me 10 years to get black belt. If I had the resources that students had now, with the internet, books, videos, or anything like that there, because I was a fanatic about jiu-jitsu, I feel like I could have gotten black belt in half the time.
I love the fact that when you give your students a blue belt, you tell them, transport you back in time to roll with me as a blue belt, you kick my ass. Like that's because it seems like blue belts, they want that confidence. They want to know their instructor is confident that they're a good blue belt, and just say it flat out. You're a better, more technical blue belt than I was when I got the belt. And so it takes away some of that, maybe that stress that they get. Am I really a blue belt? Does he think I'm actually that good at it? I think that it just kind of melts away when you tell somebody that you're a better blue belt than I was in my day. And I think that's a great thing that you're doing for those students.
Yeah, and I tell my students that, you were talking about that pressure that people feel. I said, every person who's a colored belt has tapped to a lower belt. Anybody who says they haven't is lying. They're absolutely lying. Everybody has. I have. It's happened. It'll happen more than once there. So it's not that big of a deal. And I like this kind of stuff was never told to us in the early 90s. We were kind of had the impression like higher belts never tap the lower belts. The black belts are like gods there, and they can never be beat. And that also led to a lot of injuries because we didn't want to tap. We felt it was embarrassing to get tapped by somebody lower, and then we would get hurt. So I made sure that when I was a black belt, and I had students to tell this, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's okay here. Every single person will get tapped. It doesn't matter, who it is there. So don't put that pressure on yourself. And I mean, it's natural. I mean, everybody. I mean, nobody just wants to get beat up, right? And but it'll save you a lot when it comes to injury too. Because I saw like half the injuries that white belts had early on was just because they didn't want to tap out. I'm like, everybody gets. You're a white belt too, and even colored belts, And so I really try to take that pressure off of students, and also, but like I said, I want them to know you are way better. And I even tell the black belts, when I judge my students for black belt, I don't judge them based upon where I was when my skill level was at 2001. I'm judging them in relation to where I am now. And so to me, I'm better than I was when I was back in 2001. But to me, I feel like I'm a good enough instructor that I can make you guys as good as I am now. And it's not hard as long as they're willing to put in the effort.
Well, that's a sign of a great instructor, someone who's going to share all the knowledge and try to build the students up to their level as soon as possible. That's great.
Yeah, I love sharing information. If I wasn't teaching, I mean, I'm fortunate that I can make a living teaching jiu-jitsu, but I would just, if I wasn't making a living doing it, I'd just be sharing it and teaching people. And I love, martial arts that much there. So I'm just fortunate that I was able to find an avenue in which I could make a living doing what I enjoyed.
Michael, I appreciate you sharing all this stuff with us today. How could somebody keep up with you, or where could they go to find you online?
Like we mentioned, if you're interested in the book, the website for that is www.scienceofsubmission.com. Otherwise, I teach at Smash Gyms, and you can just go to smashgyms.com. And like I said, we're in Sunnyvale, California, and also San Jose, California, and we're opening up a third location in Milpitas. So if you check out the website, if you're ever in town and would like to just drop in on a class, everybody's welcome.
Wow. Appreciate the open door policy, and I'll put links to all those on the show notes for everybody to have.
All right. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I recommend the book. I've read it, and the book is called The Science of Submission. So thanks for talking with us today, Michael.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, I'd like to thank Michael Ginn for taking the time out to come into our show and dropping knowledge to all of our listeners. As we said before, he's just an incredible teacher, competitor, and you definitely need to check out his book, Science of Submission.
Yep. One of the easiest ways, we've got the show notes there, or just go to scienceofsubmission.com, and there's all the information you need about his new book there. So I've read it, and it's a lot of good information. It makes you think about jiu-jitsu differently, and I think it will help you bring some more understanding to what's going on, even with the jiu-jitsu that you do understand.
Yeah, and I think, he talks so much about angles and stuff like that, and I think it really does make you understand a little bit more. Definitely it did with me.
Yeah, it's fun to take a different look at it. And obviously you guys just have listened to the interview with Michael. If you like that sort of thing, there's more of it. It's just in a book format. So there we go.
Definitely make sure you check us out on other forms of social media. We are on Facebook, BJJ Brick. Send us messages there. We're on Instagram. We are on YouTube. Definitely check out our YouTube. We have a question and answer. We're trying to get our YouTube definitely bigger. So check it out. And we're on Twitter. So check us out on all those and tell your friends about it. And we appreciate it.
Yeah, that's we're looking to expand our brick wall here, Gary.
Yep. So definitely check out our YouTube. That's where we're going right now.
Yep. With main focus on the podcasting stuff, because this is where all our friends like you guys are. But looking to branch out a little bit on YouTube. Another thing we're looking to help us branch out, do more things, is we have a account on a website called Patreon, Patreon. And you could go to the show notes, and there's a link to the Patreon account there, or you could go to Patreon and search for BJJ Brick. It'll pop right up. And we've even got a little thing on our YouTube channel about how this Patreon thing works. It's basically a website that supports content producers like podcasters, artists, people who make films, stuff like that. And you can go on there and you could pledge, for example, $1 per episode, and that will go to support the show. And with like different levels of support, you get different things. At the $1 per episode level, I'm going to send you an invite to our BJJ Brick private Facebook group. Right now, it's a very small group with probably 20 or 25 people in there, and we just really talk about jiu-jitsu, a lot of the podcast stuff. Earlier this week, Gary, I was interviewing our guy for next week's interview, Travis Stevens, and I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing Travis Stevens in a couple of days. Any ideas or questions I should ask him? And so we got some feedback from some of our friends there. So that's just one more way to connect with us on a different level. I'm not going to post that sort of stuff on the actual Facebook page because part of the reason is the interview hasn't happened yet. It may not happen, but just among us, small group of friends here, I definitely like to get some help and get to know you guys better.
Yeah, and we're picking your knowledge. There might be something you know a little bit more about judo or about our guests that you would like to see answered. So it kind of gets you involved in the show and lets you buy into it and get you a little more involved.
Yep, and another example of what's happening on that Facebook private group page, which you can get to through the Patreon thing. Man, I'm long sentence there, Gary. But the before that, I finally made an about page about BJJ Brick and myself and about Gary, a little bit of basic information. There's just a few paragraphs, and I posted it on the group as, hey guys, what do you think about this? I just finally made this, and Gary comes back in response because we have a picture of Gary and I hanging out together, and of course when you take a picture of two guys who are grapplers, you take it after the workout and you're exhausted, you're sweaty, and Gary's hair's a little messed up.
And I needed a haircut.
And you needed a haircut. I didn't even realize this. I just posted it up there. And Gary's like, hey, great, but it was nice if I had a picture of my hair wasn't all crazy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it is kind of crazy. Well, then this,
So Byron just
avalanche.
keeps photoshopping one after another, just make it even worse for me. So, and I have now made that my profile page on my Facebook, thanks to Byron.
Yep, get started off with Gary getting an afro, then long hair and weapons, and you have to get on the private group to see it. But it's just we try to have fun on there, and it's just a way to connect at a deeper level with the show. I think so.
Well, the crazy thing is your Photoshop skills were so good. When I was at work visiting a vendor, he is actually a Facebook fan of mine, and he's like, "Hey, I didn't know you trained with a bow staff." So that's how good it was. But I just couldn't believe that somebody thought the bow staff was real when I'm pointing a gun. So I guess I don't get much respect outside of this podcast.
Well, no, that's bad respect, and it's
street cred.
Street cred, you're getting that for sure.
Yes.
So basically, we got off topic, but the whole thing is about if you want another way to support us and send us a little bit of funds, which we hope to do more things with the show here. Patreon is a great way to do that, and there's links to that in the show notes. Gary, it's the music is telling us we got to keep the show moving here. We've got to talk about a very important topic.
Yes, the very important topic, which is our buddy Claudio.
Oh, not quite, Gary. Well played. You tried.
I tried to move it around, move it on.
And I guess we've mixed these segments up sometimes, but I want to get you now because I've got this nice little book title here. This is a part of the show. We have our audiobook, Your First Year of BJJ. And
that's a real audiobook.
That's a real one. But every week, Gary is working on a new one that he has no idea what it's about, and we get to talk about this. So, Gary, your audiobook this week is called 7 Days of Jiu-Jitsu, Week Jiu-Jitsu. How'd you come up with the name for this, Gary?
Well, I came up with a name for this because when Byron was rolling this morning with one of our buddies, I always try to egg people on. I'm that nice guy. So while Byron was smashing him in top position, I said, hey, Bob, what was that you said about Byron's jiu-jitsu? It's his jiu-jitsu's named after 7 days, week. And so I just wanted to watch Byron just smash somebody. And I was the instigator. But I am going to come out with a audio book based off of that. Your 7 days of jiu-jitsu week. So Basically, what we're going to talk about is how to make your jiu-jitsu like a week. A week has 7 days, and if we take 7 days times 4, it's 28. But if there's 4 weeks minus 3, so you take 21 days, and now you're back to 7. Did you get that, Byron?
I don't know what's going on anymore, Gary. You started introducing a lot of math. And I was with you with the 4 times the 7, and then I got distracted with other thoughts in my head, and you lost me completely.
Well, that was the key, because, it's a distraction. When you're rolling, I want to distract you, and I'll hit that different move. But what we're going to do is we're going to work on 7 different moves. So each day we're going to work on a different move. And that way, by the end of the week, we're going to know 7 moves, but we're not going to know them very well because we're not going to keep working them. We're only going to work them once. And that's why I said it's weak, not W-E-E-K, W-E-A-K, W-E-A-K. So what I'm basically telling you is don't just work on a move one day and then go to another move the next day. To get good, first of all, you have to be consistent. We talked about that, hashtag consistent. And then secondly, you can't just work on a move once. So I don't want you to have weak W-E-A-K jiu-jitsu. I want you to do moves for weeks on weeks on weeks and get very good at it. So it's going to be a very good audio book if I ever get around to it.
If you were to have a strong jiu-jitsu, how many days a week would that be? Or what number would go with that?
Well, that would be 7, but sometimes I don't really advocate training 7 days a week. I think sometimes you need some rest. You need to get out and enjoy yourself. But I think, you do need to get on the mat and train as much as possible. As long as your body is healthy and you're feeling it, and you need to work on your moves more than once.
If somebody trains, like let's say our friend Miles, who's in incredible shape, 7 days for a week. Maybe we should rename and not call it a week anymore. What would you call it, Gary?
He trained 7 and not call it a week?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
We could call it a cycle.
A cycle? Yeah, there you go. I was going to call it a strong, but a cycle sounds more official.
Call it a strong. That's good. Yeah. A strong week.
A strong week.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not the most anticipated book you've written, Gary, but...
yeah, I don't think anybody's going to buy this one. Bad thing is, I'm even confused about it.
This is confusing. It's just, basically, this one kind of spun out of some trash talk Gary did while we were rolling, and it's funny to watch you kind of make up something and squirm there. The week
that one was tough. I think I normally do a lot better on the spot, but actually I failed this week.
Oh, you didn't that bad. You didn't that bad. I need to come up with a couple of good follow-up questions for you and help you with maybe a chapter title next time, and that you always do better with those. Yeah, yep. You're guiding me along. So speaking of guiding us along, if you're going to be in Brazil, it's nice to have somebody guiding you along, but if you don't, it'd be helpful to speak a few words in Portuguese. So we do have our friend Claudio, and he's going to teach us how to say... He's going to teach us how to say sorry. Absolutely. We definitely need to know how to say sorry, and we need to know how to count. So Claudio is going to be our teacher this week, teach us how to say sorry and how to count. Oi, Claudio.
Oi, Byron. Tudo bem?
Tudo bem.
Que bom. I'm adding some things here, man. Sorry, I don't want to throw you off. Every week I add something.
That's good, and that's what we're doing. We're slowly building our like a core set of words in Portuguese. So anybody who's interested in traveling to Brazil someday, and I think a lot of us are, will be able to at least communicate at a basic level.
That's right, at least a little bit, and that's very important. At least you're showing that you're trying to communicate, and that's very, very important.
Yeah,
and especially on that culture, and anything south of the border, it's important for you to show a little interest that you're trying to communicate with those guys. Yes, very important.
Very good. And something that I do constantly is apologize for things because I'm, screwing things up and offending people on a constant basis. So how would I apologize to somebody, whether I, do something that's not super polite or maybe I offend somebody? How could I take this back another level and save myself from the embarrassment of not apologizing or being rude.
Right. That's very important. The same way as please and thank you. Sorry is another one, a very important one. And we have a few different ways to say that. I guess the main one is desculpa. So when you say just sorry, just a plain sorry, you bump into somebody or something like that walking, and you just turn around and say desculpa. So desculpa.
Desculpa.
Desculpa. Very, very good.
Desculpa.
Very
I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody. Desculpa.
Right. Desculpa. That's right. So if you want to be a little more personal, or just saying, me desculpa, just, point towards yourself or put your hand in your chest like that. Me desculpa. It's, I am sorry.
Me desculpa.
I am sorry. Me desculpa. It's M-E. And then desculpa is D-E-S-C-U-L-P-A. So me, it's mine, or it's kind of like my sorry. That's the translation. But
okay.
It's basically, I am sorry. So me desculpa.
Me
it's a great way
desculpa.
to, yeah. Just be nice. Trying to be nice to somebody, and even if you're, me desculpa, I don't speak English or something like that. Eu não falo inglês. Me desculpa, or I'm sorry, I don't speak English, or I don't speak Portuguese, or something like that. Then you can use that. Me desculpa.
Okay.
Or desculpa.
It's always very nice to be able to say sorry and thank you in any language. So those are a big deal. I want to kind of get you for more today. How about let's learn to count from 1 to 10? And I'm not going to be able to memorize that now, but if you maybe pronounce it slowly,
Sure.
I'll be able to hear it maybe and practice it later.
No, that's fine. Okay, so 1 through 10 is 1. Of course, you know that one already, right?
1.
So, I'll skip the English part.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. My bad. It's been a rough day today, man. All right. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that's 1 through 10.
Well, they're very similar but different in some ways to the Spanish ways to count to 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's instead of uno, you just say It's it's a U, M. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's basically the counting there that you need to run from somebody or something like that. If somebody starts counting, starts running, that's my plan in Brazil. If you hear somebody counting, run.
They're giving you a warning you need to get out of there?
Yeah. I'm just kidding. That's not true at all.
If I were to say 20, how would that go?
20.
20. Okay, that's similar. And then 21 would be 21.
21.
Okay.
That's right. And then you just, the same as English, you just add, 21, 22, so 21, 22, 23.
Okay, and how about the number 100?
Same.
Same?
Same. Uh-huh. C-E-M. Same.
Okay. Well, I think that will get us around quite a bit, and any negotiating you're doing, or any if somebody starts counting and they look angry, make sure your shoes are tied and get out of there, right?
Yeah, make sure to say desculpa.
Yeah, desculpa. I'm sorry, or me desculpa.
Yeah, that's right.
This is so the counting and the saying sorry. It did happen to correlate.
That's right.
All right. Well, this has been a valuable week, and I'll be re-listening to the counting to pronounce everything correctly. And muito obrigado.
De nada. Thank you very much, Brian, for having me.
Thank you for providing the information.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, Claudio, for that. And we've got one more language learning segment with Claudio next week, and he's going to teach us how to say, kind of like tell time in the different days of the week. Much like this one, you probably didn't learn how to. If you don't know how to count already in Portuguese, you probably didn't learn how. But you could go back and review it, or go to our YouTube channel. I've got all the Portuguese segments piled into one video. You can just kind of learn them at your own leisure there without having to thumb through all the different podcasts. So that's another way to do that.
Yep, and then after you've went through every one of the episodes from Claudio, go on to the internet and print yourself a certificate, and basically send us a picture of that certificate, and we'll post it on the page saying you've completed it.
Yep, and you get the certificate that you printed. Boom.
Yep, and the great thing is I just put all the work on you, so not like we have to do anything, Byron. See how I did that?
Yep, and you know that, go get a piece of that tape. The athletic tape, and get your belt, get your gi, put it on, get all official, and then tape up one of your fingers. That way you won't get as injured, But don't put that tape on your belt because you didn't earn anything.
Yeah, but with that certificate, the tape that Byron was talking about, it'll save you from paper cuts, because some of those certificates, you can get paper cuts with them. So we're just looking out for your best interest.
There you go, Gary. Always safety first. He's a very safety-oriented person.
Definitely.
Well, we want to invite you to come train with us. We've got a couple of emails, Gary, of people who are going to be in town and are going to train with us, and I need to get with you. It's later on in the summertime here, but we're going to have some friends in town that we don't know. So this will be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We can't wait. We're always down to train with anybody, and then you guys can beat us up and laugh at our jiu-jitsu.
Yep, we are in Wichita, Kansas. So if you're in the area, our email address is bjjbrick@gmail.com. If you have a question for the BJJ question and answer show, send it to that same email address, and it'll be answered on YouTube, hopefully, once I get caught up on those. So probably within a week or two.
And definitely make sure you tune in next week. We have a great guest, Travis Stephen. He is a black belt in judo, actually competed in the Olympics, which is a feat in itself. I mean, it's just incredible. And on top of that, he is a BJJ black belt. So definitely you need to tune in for actually the next 2 weeks. It's such a good episode that we turned it into 2 different episodes.
Yep, it went a little bit longer than our than most interviews, which was nice. If Travis Stevens is going to be talking about jiu-jitsu and judo, I'm not going to stop him. If he goes a little bit longer, that's just better for everybody. So we got.
Well, the thing is, we couldn't stop him even if we wanted to. I mean, the guy's so skilled, so there's no way it could have happened. So it just went longer. That's true.
And in part of the interview, he was talking about, well, if I was attacking you, if you really wanted to avoid me, you could. And he's like, you could do this, you could do that. You can go hide in a closet. You can go do this. I'm thinking, yeah, I'd go hide in the cupboard or closet.
Yeah.
So that's next week, my friends.
So don't miss it.
All right. Well, I've had a great time this week, Gary. Have you?
I always have a good time talking about jiu-jitsu and chokes and jokes, as we like to say.
There we go. As always, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Michael, I'm happy to have you on the show. We've got a lot to talk about today. You've got a new book coming out. I guess it's out already. Let me try this. Third time's a charm, Michael.
Sorry.
Michael, we've got a lot to talk about today. I'm excited to have you on here. You've got a new book coming out. The Science. I said it coming out again. Man, I am. See.
Well, at least I'm glad it's not me.
Yeah.
4
4 times in a row.